National emergency vote. Lawmakers debate President Donald Trump's border declaration. Why he might be able to receive funding without their approval. Caught in the crossfire. New concerns for thousands of citizens in war-torn Yemen. Populism and protests. Controversy over a Judeo-Christian-based school opening outside of Rome, and the role one of President Trump's former advisors is playing. And a question of faith. We delve into a new poll showing more people are doubting their Catholic faith. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, March 14th, 2019. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. 12 Republicans side with Democrats to shoot down President Donald Trump's border emergency declaration, and now the president gears up for his first veto. It is unlikely Congress will have the votes to override him. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi joins us. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. You're right. Neither the Senate nor the House have the votes right now to override the president's promised veto. President Trump urged Republicans to vote with him. One White House official says the president won't forget those senators voting against him.
The yeas are 59, the nays are 41.
Senator Mitt Romney is one of 12 Republicans who voted against the president's border emergency.
Senator, are you worried about pushback from the president for your vote today?
I think you have to do what you think is right, which stands by your principles and which is consistent with your oath of office to defend the Constitution. I saw this as a constitutional issue, not as a policy issue so much. I support the policy of building a border barrier.
After a revolutionary war against a king, our nation's founders gave to Congress, a Congress elected by the people, the power to approve all spending.
He joins all Democrats voting against the president.
The fact is that the president is trying to rewrite the Constitution.
Republicans who support the president's February 15th declaration say Congress gave away its power.
Don't pretend that we didn't delegate all these powers or that it's lawless for the executive to use the laws that we pass just because you deplore him.
Congress has granted the president the authority to do exactly what he's doing. That doesn't mean that Congress has to like it. And I do believe there is a crisis at the border.
And the crisis on our border is all too real.
Still, Michigan Democrat Debbie Stabenow says the president should be listening to today's vote, rejecting his emergency.
I think what's most significant is that we have come together now through two Congresses to support strong border security, but rejected the idea of a wall, which is not modern, smart border security.
Republicans opposing the president say the declaration sets bad precedent that future presidents could use the emergency powers to push a liberal agenda. We now await the president's promised veto. His simple tweet right after the vote: veto. Yet that's not the end of the story. Democratic states' attorneys general are suing to stop President Trump. Lauren?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi. Thank you, Jason. Leo Varadkar, the Prime Minister of Ireland, says he respects the opinion of many Catholics, but he's standing by the country's decision to legalize abortion. White House correspondent Mark Iron questioned him today. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. Is Ireland losing its Catholic identity? That's another question we posed to the Prime Minister today, just months after Irish voters approved abortion in the historically Catholic country. Listen to his responses.
Mr. Prime Minister, what is your reaction to the many Catholics who are upset about the legalization of abortion in your country?
Yeah, well, look, I respect their opinion. I was brought up Catholic myself, but we put this question to the Irish people in a referendum, and 64% of Irish people voted for choice and voted to liberalise our abortion laws, and we are a democracy. That's the decision that we have made. But what we all agree on is that we want to reduce the number of crisis pregnancies to prevent abortions ever happening in the first place. And we're putting a lot of investment into sex education, into making contraception more available so that women never face a crisis pregnancy in the first place. And that's something
Is Ireland losing its Catholic identity?
I think being Catholic has only ever been part of our identity. You know, we're a country that has a deep heritage. It's not just Catholic, it's Protestant as well. And indeed goes back to the pre-Christian era. So I think we're rebalancing to a country that sees itself as having a Christian heritage but not being exclusively defined by it.
Before his visit with President Trump today, Prime Minister Varadkar, who is openly gay, says he and his partner Matthew Barrett received a warm reception at the vice president's home for breakfast. Varadkar says growing up in Ireland, his personal beliefs would have conflicted with the law, but now that's changed.
I stand here, leader of my country, flawed and human, but judged by my political actions and not by my sexual orientation, my skin tone, gender, or religious beliefs.
In 2015, marriage was redefined in Ireland to allow for same-sex unions. Now, today, Prime Minister Varadkar also spent time on Capitol Hill, and he's back here at the White House tonight for a festive ceremony ahead of St. Patrick's Day. Lauren.
White House correspondent Mark Irons. Thank you, Mark. Former Texas State Representative Beto O'Rourke says he's running for president.
Over the coming days, I'm going to travel this country and listen to those who I seek to serve.
The Democrat narrowly lost his bid for Senate. Last year, the 46-year-old became a sensation for his grassroots organizing and for his social media savvy. It mobilized young voters. He also set fundraising records before losing to Republican Ted Cruz by 3 points. The Senate moves to end U.S. support of Saudi Arabia in Yemen's ongoing civil war. Last night, senators voted against backing the Saudi-led coalition. Some say it's because of the Saudis' poor human rights records. Others are weary of supporting a war that has triggered what's been called the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby reports from the State Department. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. The Trump administration strongly opposes the Senate's vote, even threatening a presidential veto. But while Congress and the president fight over whether to support Saudi Arabia, State Department officials are focused on the war in Yemen, where thousands of innocent people have been forced to flee their homes and thousands more are caught in the crossfire. Humanitarians with the United Nations warn thousands of Yemenis are still trapped as Saudi-backed troops fight Houthi rebels who are backed by Iran. More than 5,300 families have fled the fighting in the past few weeks. This woman says we are in a very bad state, moving from place to place. She adds we left our livestock and our homes, and we didn't take anything but the clothes on our backs. Most of the families are leaving a district in the northern part of the country called Kushar. The mountainous district and surrounding area have been cut off due to Saudi-led airstrikes. Yemen's military says those airstrikes mistakenly killed 8 of their border guards and wounded 33 others today. Throughout the 4-year war, coalition bombs have at times struck Allied forces and civilians. Today, human rights advocates called out Saudi Arabia.
Since March 2015, Human Rights Watch has documented about 90 apparently unlawful attacks by the Saudi-led coalition, some of which may amount to war crimes.
Many senators are also distrustful of Saudi Arabia's government, who may have played a role in the murder of Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi in October.
The joint resolution, as amended, is passed.
Last night, the GOP-controlled Senate voted in favor of a resolution that curtails military support. Republican Mike Lee, who voted yes, says the president has too much power in deciding where and when the military gets involved.
Congress has handed over this power lock, stock, and barrel to the executive. It has sadly occurred under the leadership of Houses of Representatives, Senates, and White Houses of every conceivable partisan combination. I consider both parties equal opportunity offenders, and this is a step in the right direction.
It's important to note no U.S. troops are on the ground in Yemen, but the U.S. has helped provide weapons, logistical support, and even intelligence. Yemen's government is denouncing the Senate's vote, saying it'll only embolden Iran. But the Houthi rebels, on the other hand, are hailing the decision, saying the U.S. support has prolonged the war. Lauren?
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby reporting from the State Department. Thank you, Wyatt. The government of Saskatchewan in Canada is seeking to continue to fund non-Catholic students in Catholic schools. A 2017 court ruling put the practice in jeopardy and may force 10,000 students out of Catholic schools because they are not Catholic. Poland's Catholic bishops are celebrating 100 years since their conference was founded. This week in Warsaw, church leaders marked the milestone with a solemn mass. The Catholic Church in Poland has suffered persecution under Russian, Prussian, and Austrian domination. Church leaders say the faith of Polish Catholics is vibrant despite a difficult history and present. And the conference has released data showing since 1990 there have been 382 cases of priests abusing minors. The Primate of Poland expressed pain, shame, and a sense of guilt over the misconduct. Another protest is planned Saturday near Rome over an initiative in Italy spearheaded by Steve Bannon. He was President Trump's former White House chief strategist. The Academy for the Judeo-Christian West will open at a monastery just outside of Rome in 2020. The monastery was founded in 1204 by Pope Innocent III. Benjamin Harnwell, founder of the Dignitatis Humanae Institute, joins us from Rome. Benjamin, you're working closely with Steve Bannon. What's the goal of this school?
Well, Lauren, the Academy for the Judeo-Christian West is a concept that Steve and I have been working on now for a few years, and the project essentially has as its core the idea to defend the Judeo-Christian West based on the recognition that man, let's say, defend the West as a concept based on the recognition that man is made in the image and likeness of God. So at its heart, it's an anthropological thing.
Benjamin Harnwell, besides teaching politics, what will your curriculum teach about religion and faith?
Well, the curriculum is going to be based on 4 disciplines as we debut the concept this year here in Rome. It's going to be philosophy, theology, history, and economics. And specifically to do with the faith, we're going to be highlighting, because this is a great underappreciated element of even those who actively support the idea of the Judeo-Christian West. But we're going to be sort of illustrating the fact that in addition to the West being a construct based on Athens, which is Greek philosophy, Jerusalem, which is the Judeo-Christian tradition, and Rome, which is the Roman law and order, what is absolutely crucial to the understanding of the West is this idea that every single person, without exception, is made in the image and likeness of God.
Why do you think people are protesting about your school before it's even opened?
Because there are people who are opposed to the idea that the West has a basis founded on a religious belief, let's say Christianity. That opposition is often found in the left of the political spectrum, and in fact it is the left-wing political parties, from the moderate left all the way through to the communists, who are actively involved in organising these protests. They're opposed to the idea that Christianity has a role to play in our modern society. They're opposed to the historical reality that Christianity has had a historic role to play, and they want to close down the debate.
Benjamin Harnwell, founder of the Dignitatis Humanae Institute, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Lauren.
Coming up, we sit down with a top leader in Hungary who tells us about their family-friendly policies. My next guest has come to Washington, D.C. from Hungary to talk about policies designed to protect the family structure. The Hungarian government says between 2010 and 2018, marriages there increased by 43%. Divorces decreased by 20%. The fertility rate increased by 17%, and the number of abortions decreased 25%. Joining me now is Katalin Novak, Hungary's Minister of State for Family Affairs. She's also Vice President of the governing conservative Fidesz party. Welcome to our broadcast.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
You're here in Washington for this Making Families Great Again conference, but I want to talk to you about what's happening in Hungary and the new income tax elimination for women, Hungarian women with 4 or more children. It's receiving global attention. What's the response been?
That's a part of our family action plan, let's say, because we have a very strong family-oriented governance. And that means that we've been in governmental position since 2010, and we've been elected 3 times with a 2/3 majority. So that means that...
The Fidesz party.
The Fidesz party, that's it, yes. And we actually have the support of the Hungarian people. We have a national consensus about the support of families, the importance of family values. And that is why our Prime Minister could now introduce new measures again. And one of these new measures is that, what you just mentioned.
What is the response? Are a lot of women saying, sign me up?
Hungarian people find this very positive because they see that we actually invest our money in the future generations, invest in the responsible raised children. And I think that's the best thing you can invest in. That means that we now invest 4.8% of our GDP to family support, and the OECD average is 2.55. So that means that we really do make some progress. And
Spoken
also,
like a true economist, aren't you? An economist?
Yeah, I'm an economist.
Yes, okay,
Sorry
I hear that. I hear
but
that. I need to move on about your party. I hear what you're saying here, but you're also under fire. 13 conservative ones have called for you to be expelled over anti-immigration, anti-EU campaign. What is your response to that?
We stick to the conservative values. So that's something that we are not able to give up, and we will never give up. That means that we have our Judeo-Christian heritage. We have our Christian culture, which we take for very important, and we represent this Christian culture, the Christian values in all our governance, no matter which measure taken. And also we have a policy which is anti-migration. That's true. We don't see
and
migration.
You're admitting that.
Yes.
You know, there's a lot of criticism for people saying you're anti-immigrant.
We don't consider migration as being the tool for recovering from our demographic crisis or demographic challenges to face. We think that we see our future in our children. So that means that we would like to empower young Hungarians to be able to have as many children as they wish to, and to do the most for this. And for us, mass migration, is not an answer to this demographic crisis. In fact, that's what most of the European states or political leaders do think, and that is actually the point of our discussions, or the reason why we are so harshly attacked.
Thank you so much for your insight on Hungary, on family. Katalin Novak, Hungary's Minister of State for Family and Youth.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Activists say there are millions of Uyghur Muslims being held in detention centers in China. They showed photos of what they call Nazi-like concentration camps during an exhibition today in Washington, D.C. One man tells us at least 20 members of his family are in those detention centers, and he ran into trouble with Chinese authorities as well.
I was arrested and detained in the prison for more than 2 years in 2005, simply because I wrote an article concerning the future of Uyghur culture titled Uyghur Culture in Danger.
Is your culture in danger? Tahir Amin says China is guilty of inhuman crimes against the Uyghurs, including banning their language and closing places of worship. The former head of the Catholic Church in Belgium has died. Cardinal Daniels was the head of the country's Catholic Bishops' Conference for more than 30 years. At times, he was criticized for his apparent willingness to embrace secular liberal politics. Cardinal Daniels was 85 years old. For more on this story, including what the Vatican said about his service and an allegation he asked a victim of clergy abuse to remain quiet, visit our partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com. Up next, analysis of a poll saying a growing number of American Catholics are questioning their faith. And an underwater monument on a frozen lake in Michigan is becoming a hot spot. Lawmakers in Arkansas and Utah pass 18-week abortion bans. Both bills now head to the respective governors. Arkansas's governor says he supports the measure. The governor of Utah has not said if he will sign the proposal, but has said he is against abortion in general. Tonight on EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, Victoria Robinson is a director of external relations for Save the Storks. She shares her journey from choosing an abortion 30 years ago to becoming a pro-life advocate today.
I say this all the time, but there are more warning signs on a carton of cigarettes about the dangers of smoking than there are when a woman goes to an abortion clinic.
You can see more of Catherine Hadrow's interview tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern on EWTN. Tonight, we take a closer look at a Gallup poll of American Catholics who are questioning whether or not to remain in the church amid the clergy sex abuse scandal. As we reported last night, Gallup found there's a 15-point increase in those self-identified Catholics who've questioned their faith. 2002, 22%, and in 2019, 37%. Joining me now by Skype from Princeton, New Jersey, is R.J. Snell of the Witherspoon Institute, an independent research center. Welcome to our broadcast, R.J.
Thank you so much. Good evening.
Good evening. What do you make of those numbers?
Well, at first glance, they're fairly disconcerting. It seems like an enormous increase.
But when you think about it and look at the statistics, they don't actually tell you very much. The question is worded, have you personally considered leaving the church or not? And it doesn't tell us whether that's a passing fancy or an anguish soul searching, or whether someone is seriously moving out the door, or it's just an expression of frustration. So it remains to be seen what these numbers mean, I think.
I agree with you until I looked at these next numbers. RJ Snell, let's look at this. U.S. Catholics who attend Mass every single week. Those are people who are in the church with the priests. In 2002, 12% questioned, and in 2019, 22%. I know that you can't tie it directly to the clergy sex abuse crisis, but those numbers to me seem to be pretty significant, especially for Mass-going Catholics.
Yeah, I will admit, when upon first reading it, I hope to think that it was merely cultural Catholics, those who the statistics, there's particular polls say almost 50% of them have considered leaving, but these are people who never attend. I tried to take some consolation in that, thinking that cultural Catholicism it was revealing its weakness. But as you say, faithful weekly Mass attenders have some concern about the future of the church. Again, the poll doesn't tell us what the major cause of that is, whether or not they have frustration with larger concerns in the church, or whether it's particularly the abuse crisis itself. But it certainly is notable, that kind of number, isn't it?
I want to move on to who seems to be getting the blame for a lot of this. 41% of U.S. Catholics who were surveyed in this poll said they have a great deal of confidence in their priests, at their church, and about the same in Pope Francis. However, the numbers drop significantly when you talk in general about Catholic priests in the U.S., 20%, and U.S. bishops. Why do you think there's such a disparity? At first, I thought, okay, these are people they don't know, right? They don't know generally priests in the U.S. They don't know generally bishops, but most people don't necessarily know Pope Francis either. So how do you explain those numbers?
Well, it certainly seems with this second round of abuse crises that the hierarchy in the American church, particularly after the Cardinal McCarrick scandal, seems to have affected people very deeply. A sense that the hierarchy was not necessarily watching or not necessarily reporting or keeping their duty. So I think most people imagine their own priest to be a relatively faithful, approachable, personable man that they have a good deal of respect for. Probably exceptions here and there, as ordinary human affairs would be. But the sense of the lurking hierarchical presence, I think there's a good deal of frustration and irritation just at the moment because of the McCarrick scandals.
RJ Snell, director of the Center on the University and the Intellectual Life at the Witherspoon Institute. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Finally tonight, more than 1,000 Catholics, some curious onlookers, also gathered last weekend on frozen Lake Michigan. They were there to honor a makeshift monument to those who were killed in diving accidents in Michigan. And the memorial is an underwater crucifix that dates from 1962. It was moved to its current location closer to the shore near a popular spot for diving in 1984. And in previous years, people have waited for more than 2 hours to pray and remember lost loved ones in Lake Michigan's waters. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. Good night, and God bless you.